Good morning, all. Matt Makins here with Weather 5280 and my own YouTube channel. So let's talk about the couple of storm systems that are impacting us, one for Colorado and the Denver area, and the other for the Great Lakes. We'll talk about that one in a moment. Let's just do a general setup here. This is a satellite picture from this morning, and notice right in here, that's the sunrise as it moves across. So that's kind of cool to see from a satellite vantage point. Uh, but the storm systems that we've had, they're kind of forming out here in the far North Pacific and trying to move, but there's a massive ridge in place over Alaska. You might have heard about the heat there and that massive ridge, but that's forming or forcing our storm flow to go well into the Arctic and then diving southward along the Rockies from Canada into the U.S., driving in lots of cold and in some cases some moisture, albeit kind of limited moisture. Let's zoom in on the picture here and take a closer look here at Colorado, and then I'll fly over to the Great Lakes. But we have the leading edge of the cloud cover right in here, and you can see it moving toward, there's the Denver metro area, and down into Colorado Springs. You can see the city lights from the satellite picture. But we have this initial band of clouds moving through, producing some snowfall this Thursday morning. And that snow started, but is part of the same line we talked about yesterday. The initial line would kind of come in and fall apart throughout the morning hours, and then we're waiting for a resurgence, a redevelopment of that snowfall later today. I'm going to switch vantage points here just for a quick moment. Let's go to Go 16 East, and we'll fly in here. We've got this storm system, kind of all of the storm systems kind of coming out of Canada, providing lots of cold air. But if you're around the Great Lakes region, that cold air coming over the lakes is going to produce some heavy lake effect snow as we head into the weekend. So I'll have more on that in just a second. All right, so that's kind of the overall setting the stage, if you will, as far as where the storms are and the storm flow. Let's switch over here. This is a modeling product. It's called the Euro Ensembles. Basically, it's one model run, but then you perturb it, you flick it, if you will, and create a bunch of different variations off of one model run, or model physics, I should say. And so you create an ensemble or multiple combined together. Let's go through. This is surface temperatures starting last night at 5 p.m. local. Let's go forward in time. See this burst of cold that popped in right in here? That cold is the cold air that's moving in for us today, tonight, and tomorrow. I'll have low temperatures, single digit low temperatures in just a moment. That cold air spreads all the way down into central Texas, so around Dallas or so. Now, let's go forward in time into the weekend. This is Saturday into Sunday. There comes this next surge of cold air. And this one's going to be for the Great Lakes, producing that lake effect snow and then hitting the U.S. East Coast. Let's get into next week just for kicks and giggles because of Thanksgiving. So here we are early in the week. Things get milder early next week. And then here we approach Thanksgiving Day. A lot of heat for Western Canada, northwestern U.S. That heat moves down into Colorado. Cooler temperatures remain for Thanksgiving Day out across the far northeast. But in most cases, we're moderating things a bit next week, with the exception of the eastern seaboard. So we're going to get a little bit calmer as we go beyond the storm system and beyond this weekend. That's the long-term outlook. All right, let's pop over here. This is the Ambient Weather Network, ambientweather.net, brought to you by Kestrel. And these are all Kestrel weather stations on the map, looking at Denver Metro in the center. We're sitting in the teens and 20s. First thing Thursday morning, it's about 8 o'clock when I'm recording this. 16, though, up into Wyoming. And as you look elsewhere, let's just broaden this view. We have the teens and 20s to the north, into Wyoming, the Dakotas, and Nebraska. That's the colder air that's going to be moving our way. A couple of webcams from across the area shown here on the right. There's Golden, we have Fort Collins, and occasionally I've been watching these webcams, again brought by Kestrel, and noting some snowfall. I've also been popping over here to Lake Michigan and watching some of the cameras here, as it's relatively quiet now. If you watched the football game from West Michigan last night, there were giant snowflakes coming down. That was cool. But we're waiting the lake effect snow here as we go through the next couple of days, and I'll touch on that in a moment. First off, Colorado folks, the snowfall, snow trend today, if you will, we're still looking at the snow chances to increase. I'm going to pause at roughly your lunch hour here, and this is snowfall accumulation based on one model through the lunch hour. Very limited around the Denver metro area and Fort Collins out over the eastern plains. So this morning snow band that moves through produces snowfall, yes, may produce some slick road conditions, but watch what happens beyond noon and we go into the evening hours. There's another push of snowfall. You're seeing the colors ramp up here, and we get into Friday morning and Friday midday. We'll stop at Friday lunch. The focus of the snowfall is the northern Front Range Mountains And also as you get into the ranges out closer to Steamboat Resort and over Rabbit Pass. So kind of two focal point areas. This is one model output. Don't pay attention necessarily to the numbers, but the coloration and the focal point area of the snowfall. Let's switch to another vantage point. This is just a different model, same view, and let's go through the same time and let's go out just a couple of days. Same focal point for the higher snowfall totals. Ignore the numbers on the map. Why is that? Let me show you another model. This is the HER, we affectionately call it. It's a super short range, super localized forecast based hourly on radar conditions, everything else that you can put into a model, and it goes forward in time. I'm going to go forward in time. Here we are Friday morning, Friday midday, and Friday afternoon. Why is this model, even though the focal points of higher snowfall totals, why is it higher? And the key thing here is right there. Internal model ratio calculation. Go back to the last two. 10 to 1. 10 to 1. So what's happening here is this particular model, the HER, in this simulation, is calculating its own snow ratio as you go forward in time. This event being such a cold event, snow ratios will be high, meaning how much water it takes to produce 1 inch of snowfall. In this case, we're looking at much higher ratios because the air is colder. So a 10 to 1 ratio in these two models is going to be way too low of a ratio. We have colder air. With a higher ratio, you're going to produce these higher totals as you see in here. So that's why in the last two model runs, I was telling you to kind of ignore the numbers. You have to account for snow ratios. That is a big problem as you look across social media, as you look at certain, not all, but certain media channels in Denver, they oftentimes ignore that fact. So a lot of times when you blame the weather person for a low forecast, well, they probably ignored, well, I shouldn't say probably, but in some cases they ignore the snow ratio. Absolutely cannot do that. Let me go over here and break down the storm a little bit more closely for Denver and Colorado, and then we'll touch base and wrap up this video for the folks in the Great Lakes. But winter storm severity, as this storm moves through, again, our focal points, same area, same focus for the heavier snowfall. And that's where we're going to start to see these minor into moderate traffic issues. Around Denver, we're terrible drivers. I wouldn't be shocked if we have major issues at some point on some interstates or roads. But from a weather standpoint, we're looking at a minor to moderate event to move through. And it is going to focus on, say, Castle Rock, Sedalia, all the way up to the north near Fort Collins and expanding out into some of the central and northern mountains. Sometimes you guys really like to see these gambler charts. So let me show those to you. The gamblers charts, I pull in multiple runs of models and calculate how confident, let's say, that model is in certain snowfall totals. So in this case, we're looking at Boulder, Fort Collins, Greeley, Longmont, Loveland, basically northern Colorado. In this particular model simulation, how confident is that model in getting us into the 6 or 8 to 10-inch range? The confidence drops quite a lot. Boulder is still sitting here pretty healthy at 6 inches, but the vast majority here, the confidence in the modeling itself is like a 2 to 5, upwards to 6. That's for northern Colorado. Denver, confidence in these higher totals is a bit lower, kind of trailing off there at around 4. What about the Palmer Divide? Lower here as well. And down into Colorado Springs, you may see some dynamics on the other side of the Palmer Divide, on the kind of the south-facing side of Monument Hill, if you will, and that may enhance some of these totals. But in most cases, as you look at, I call it the model's confidence in certain thresholds of snowfall totals, we're seeing, generally speaking, the following. And this is kind of the weather setup for us today. Focal points we talked about, totals using higher snow ratios. Even the light gray area is upwards of 2 inches, perhaps a little bit more, if we can work on the dynamics, work on the lift a little bit here along the Palmer Divide and down to the south. So right in there. For Denver and north, throughout Fort Collins, we're easily in that 2 to 4 inch range. But again, some pops of 4 to 6s occur, not only because of model confidence, but better dynamics there, and the snow ratios supporting those kind of totals. This is just a zoomed in map of the same thing, just in northern Colorado. So Nederland, Ward, Ellens Park, Estes Park, Glen Haven, out to about Hygiene, Niwot, into Superior and Boulder, west side of Fort Collins out toward Poudre Park. These kind of areas will have the higher snowfall totals out of this storm system. What about temperatures? I mentioned snow ratios, and that's because it's so much colder this time. High temperatures Thursday, likely in the mid 20s. Here's Golden, 26, 25 Greeley, 25 Fort Collins, 28 Steamboat. Let's get into the lows tonight. Ooh, not near record setting, but certainly cold. Last time we had single digit lows was back in early March, March 11th, I believe. 7 for Broomfield tonight, Fort Morgan 6, 3 in Kiowa, Castle Rock 6, 7 degrees for Colorado Springs, Walden at 4 below. Some of the valleys here, North Park, Middle Park, South Park, some of those lows are going to get way down there, double digits below zero probably. Maximum temperatures Friday. Not much of a warm up tomorrow. Teens and 20s across Colorado for the most part. Southwest, you're kind of most unimpacted by the storm, so you'll stay in the 40s tomorrow. What about Saturday? Single digit lows again. Look at Walden this time, 11 below. Steamboat, 5 below. Hot Sulphur Springs, 5 below. Around Dillon, Frisco, 2 below. But Broomfield, Greeley, Fort Collins, Fort Morgan, out of the eastern plains, mostly single digits. But Hugo gets down to 1. So we are very cold Saturday, but again, not quite close to record lows, which are pretty much in the double digits below zero. Then on Saturday, we do begin a rebound with 30s and 40s. So that's kind of a weather roundup for Colorado. But there's some bigger news to be making headlines as we head into the weekend. So perhaps you're flying out of Denver or flying anywhere toward the Great Lakes for Thanksgiving week. And if that happens this weekend, you may see some delays. Winter storm severity, we're hitting major to extreme levels here in sections of the Great Lakes region, but mostly in Michigan. Snowfall totals, you see a little bullseye around Denver and northern Colorado, but for the rest of the country, relatively quiet until you get close to, say, Duluth, northern Wisconsin, and then into Michigan, sections of New York. Let's get down a closer view here. So here's coastal areas of Michigan, especially up to the north. So we're up close to Harbor and things like that. And then across the lake towards Sault Ste. Marie, the totals tail off a bit. But right in here, this bullseye, that's a foot and a half, almost 2 feet of snow. Lake effect snow there. As you get closer to Detroit, of course, you're moving over land, you're losing the lake effect, so far less snowfall. And then you look over here to Buffalo, and Buffalo's well in approaching the 2 foot mark as well, 18 plus. And then you go north of Syracuse, same situation. So lake effect snow pockets here. The entire storm system likely will impact flights for Friday, Saturday, and potentially Sunday too. So there's heavy snowfall in those areas of the Great Lakes. Maximum temperatures Thursday across the country, bullseye cold over the northern plains and Montana, mostly teens and 20s. If you want to find some heat, go to Phoenix, only 70 though. Tampa down to Miami will also be in the 70s and some 80s. Minimum temperatures tonight, you see the bullseye of cold, teens, 20s, single digits below zero across the northern plains, mostly 20s and 30s elsewhere. Get into Friday's afternoon highs, teens and 20s across much of the northern states, and then across the south, 69 Phoenix. So the cold air that we've been in, this pattern over the last week to 2 weeks here, is driving in cold and it's going all the way down to the south. San Antonio and Austin, 50s probably for Friday. As you look at the Saturday morning, cold spreads across most of the country, teens, 20, single digits across the vast majority of the northern states and then the southern states and coastal regions, 30s to 40s. Saturday will begin to rebound around the west with 30s here, but that cold air we've had for 2 days will be pushing off to the east. So Minneapolis is high on Saturday, only 17, and Detroit will be somewhere in the 20s. So that's going through that lake effect snow. So bottom line here is, yes, we do have to watch out for the storm systems, the storm flow. Um, Kind of impressive. And the Great Lakes snowfall, far more impressive than what we're about to have here in Colorado. As we get into Thanksgiving week, as I mentioned, conditions moderate a bit, which may be better for most of our travel plans. We'll see you guys on the next time. That's a quick storm recap for today. I'll probably have more on your Thanksgiving week, but there we are Saturday. Coldest air, Minneapolis. And that's how we'll kick off our Thanksgiving week.